Hello there everybody, this is Krista and welcome back to Crochet Witch Tarot, and I am back with my fidget toy and another segment in what I'm now calling Tarot and Neurodivergence. I started specifically with Tarot and ADHD, but as I discover more about myself and also just learn more, I think bringing it to a broader topic of neurodivergence just seems to make more sense because of the just great amount of overlap there is with experience between the different neurodivergences. Is that how you would say that? Neurodivergences. Anyways, so tarot and neurodivergence. And today, what I want to talk about, what's been kind of just in my little brain, is the idea of rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria, and how it relates for me to my tarot reading and tarot collecting. So there's like just a million different topics I feel like I could talk about, so I will try not to ramble too much, but it's just, you know, when you have like just a thought rumbling around in your brain, you just want to get it out. I feel like that's what all these videos are, so as usual, not much plan here, except that I do have a definition pulled up. So for anyone who doesn't know, rejection, sensitive dysphoria, or RSD, it is commonly just shortened to. This is from Cleveland Clinic. Is when you experience severe emotional pain because of a failure or feeling rejected. This condition is linked to ADHD, and experts suspect it happens due to differences in brain structure. Those differences mean your brain can't regulate rejection-related emotions and behaviors, making them much more intense. Now, this definition says it is specifically related to ADHD. However, from my other reading on it, there is some thought on it not really being specific to ADHD. Just like I said, it's like there's so much crossover, and I feel like, like for example, the amount of people who kind of have a dual diagnosis of things like ADHD and autism, or like ADHD and OCD, which is a neurodivergence as well. It just, there really is so much crossover, so I think the only part of that definition I don't necessarily agree with is putting it in the specific box of ADHD. However, it is a newer concept, so it's gonna, you know, it's starting somewhere. So not to say that, like, they're wrong, but just my thought on it. So to put it in my own terms, how I experience rejection, sensitive dysphoria, and this is not something that every neurodivergent person is going to experience, but it is a common experience, and it's something that I do deal with pretty heavily, and just, of course, since this brain is the one I've had from the start, always have. For me, what it looks like is having a really hard, intensely hard time dealing with the emotions that come from any actual rejection or perceived rejection. And I think what really from just learning more about this, what interested me is that it's possible that it has to do with just not being able to regulate those kinds of emotions in the same way as someone else might, because that feels really true for me, where it's like I can logic out that what is happening is not that bad, or that someone probably isn't rejecting me in the way I am taking it. But even though I can reason it out, it's like I have this emotional, physical reaction of just panic and just really kind of intense, like anxiety about it. That's really, it's been quite the journey learning how to kind of self-regulate that when I don't naturally like have the things to do that for me. And so not to say I figured it out, I cracked the case, because absolutely not. But I think just sometimes like a self-awareness around it helps. Anyways, so with learning all this, and I think what brought some of this into my brain was watching I can't remember what they call the series, but the series Lisa and Don Michelle are doing right now, and they did their last video on collecting. And not that they didn't talk about rejection sensitive dysphoria, but they were talking about collecting, and it got my brain going on it. So I guess we'll start there, because I think with just learning about it, I realize how, like, it permeates everything, and just explains a lot of things I have done or thoughts I've had around certain things that I can just kind of be aware of now. And so I think an interesting way I have experienced this in the context of tarot collecting, I think two big ways. The first way, before I even really got into TarotTube, when I started collecting just a few decks at that point, like I maybe had like 10. They fit into my desk drawer at one point. This is when I was living at my old house, so I didn't have much space to store things, so it was all in a drawer. But the reason it also all needed to get stored in a particular drawer was because of the just immediate, innate shame I felt around amassing a certain number of a specific thing. So because I was collecting tarot decks, and I don't have many people in my day-to-day life who also do that, it's not normalized. Because it is, I mean, you know, when I'm in this world, and like now that I'm so involved, it doesn't feel like this very specific niche, but it is. It is a niche hobby for sure. So I realize now that had a lot to do with the rejection sensitive dysphoria, where I wanted to hide this thing that I loved just out of the automatic fear of someone rejecting it, and just knowing I would not handle that well. The idea of, like, I mean, that's, you know, it's my special interest. And so the idea of someone not accepting that, it's hard for anyone, but experiencing the kind of RSD angle of it, it would have just felt like this soul-crushing, like, life and death thing. And so I really spent a long time hiding it, and in some ways I certainly still do, but not to the same extent. I won't, like, I've got all my decks, not all my decks, but my decks I'm working with right now on display. I still probably hide the extent of it from most people, just because it's niche and some people just don't understand, and I think having that protection is okay. You know, it's not to say that I'm never gonna overcome this part of myself. It just is what it is, so in some ways, the protection is fine. Like, that's okay. I think the other way I have really experienced this, when there is that discourse that tends to just go around every once in a while. But I want to say, I feel like it was like a year and a half ago, where it was because I'm new to, you know, relatively new to watching TarotTube. It was my first time experiencing this discourse around what is right and wrong when it comes to the number of decks you have. And there was that period of time where the heavy opinion being pushed out there was that less is more, and having so many decks is bad. And I just remember, you know, watching some of these videos, and everyone is entitled to their opinion. I hope that by talking about any of this, I'm never feeling seeming like I am blaming anyone else for my own stuff. That's not my point ever. I just think it's just something I want to talk about because I think a lot of people maybe can relate to this and maybe it's just helpful in some way. Anyway, I found myself very heavily internalizing that and feeling like in those moments it feels like a direct message to me, even though that is not what's going on. Of course, when you're watching a YouTube video, it is not made specifically for you. Like, that's just never the case. But when someone has this kind of intense opinion that differs from what I'm doing, I very quickly go into a mode of what I'm doing must be wrong, because there is this rejection there. That is not that person's fault. It's not their fault. They get to share what they want. But in engaging with that, I realize that now that the RSD really played a big role in how I felt during that time, because I did do a pretty big deck cull. Cull is such an interesting word, isn't it? I've never said that word out loud. I know that's the term. I know there's other terms, but I can't think of them now. But what a cull. Cull. What a weird word. Anyway. I did do a pretty big deck haul of many decks that I have since repurchased. And the reason for doing that, I now know, is the anxiety I felt because of a perceived rejection. And I think being able to reflect on that now, it's helpful and it's interesting to me. And moving forward, now that I know about this, I won't do those same things. I think that's the thing to say, is maybe like talking about this and reflecting on it. For me and for anyone who relates, it's, you know, again, it's not something that's just gonna get completely fixed. It's still an experience I'm going to have. But now, if that goes around again, I can watch those videos and say, okay, ooh, I'm having this intense feeling. I can't stop this intense feeling right now, but I can have the logic in the background saying, this is not about you. Like, it's not a direct message. Like, you specifically are not being rejected, and even if you are, that's okay. That's okay. That's the tough thing. Ooh, I feel like I've been working through is that, like, it's fine. If someone does, if it is not even a perceived rejection, but an actual rejection, that's okay. Eek! Oh my gosh, don't like it. What else was I gonna talk? I'm sorry, this is like so all over the place. Oh, the other thing I've been thinking about in terms of this is when it comes to my tarot reading. And I find when I am experiencing RSD, when I'm reading for myself, I've not experienced it where just the act of me doing a reading for myself is going to trigger that. But if I am experiencing it in other areas of my life, it will permeate a lot of the things I do. So, for example, if I make a mistake at work and it's pointed out to me, that is a rejection. Not that it's a, like, mean or bad rejection, it's a necessary one if I've made a mistake, you know, depending on the delivery, of course, but where I work, it's always a nice delivery. But if it's just sort of hits me emotionally in the right way, or it just triggers that RSD, and I end up in that spiral, it's like I can logic it out in the background of my brain, but the feeling of it can stick around, depending on the level of what's going on, of the rejection. It can stick around for a bit. So I have had experiences where that rejection feeling sticks around for a whole day, a few days at a time. And when I go to do a reading for myself, it will still stick around in that moment. And that's where things like self-doubt and imposter syndrome start to really creep in. It's like almost like this feeling of my defenses are already down, so these other things can kind of jump on into, like join the party. So I'll find myself really second guessing my interpretations for things that I would not otherwise if I wasn't having, like, dealing with this intense feeling of rejection, or doubting even something as simple and seemingly silly as like the deck I choose for the day. Like, I'll stand there for 10 minutes thinking like, nope, that's wrong. No, why would I think that? That's wrong. It's just an interesting thing. This whole rejection sensitive dysphoria. And I think it's an interesting conversation to have. I hope I'm not just like, I also don't intend to just be like dumping this. I think I'm just hoping with all these videos that it just maybe is helpful to anyone else experiencing this, and maybe if you don't have the words to it yet, or you do already have the words, but it's just nice knowing someone else deals with that. But I find that as I learn more about it, it does get easier, but it still happens. And the more kind of I challenge myself to get out of my comfort zones, that makes it harder as well. Like, becoming a deck creator really posed a challenge for the RSDI experience, because I am opening myself up not only for people to really love my creation, but to maybe really not like it, and to say so. Maybe even having people like try it and it doesn't work out, and that's all fine. It's every creation is not meant for everyone, and I wouldn't want it to be any other way. But there is this kind of extra challenge I feel where when a rejection does happen in that regard, it feels very intense because of that. But there's so much to learn in that as well. I think maybe that's my thoughts. I realize I've been rambling, but I also wanted to use this video to show, of course, some decks that I like using when I am really dealing with these just intense emotions around rejection. So, to start, a deck I've really liked using for this for a bit now is the Into the Lonely Woods Oracle. Now, this is an oracle really built around the idea of grief, but I find it really hits a good place for me, really for almost anything I am learning and going through when it comes to my own neurodivergence and how my brain works, because I think the way I have experienced this, late diagnosis, however you want to think of late, really they just mean not as a child. So late diagnosis is that there is a lot of grief that comes with it. So even though, like, this deck feels, at least when I first saw it, to me it was like, oh, a good deck for if, like, you lose someone important to you. But I really do think it spans grief in every which way, and it's really helped with a lot of different things, but really the rejection sensitive dysphoria, because the deck and the guidebook really sort of make it this like almost hermit experience where I find it's really good for anything like that feels kind of, what are my words here? I don't know if othering is necessarily right, but like I was saying, it does feel like this grief process because I am working through the idea that I don't work in the ways that I was doing for a long time and thought I could seamlessly, and turns out like I was not. But also that the like receiving a late diagnosis, again, I'm speaking from my own experience and about my own experience, is also very, it feels isolating, because then it's this whole thing of like, who do I tell? Do I tell anyone at all? Does this change anything? What does this change? It really is this like hermit's journey, I feel like, or it has been for me. And so I really, really love this oracle, honestly, for anything dealing with neurodivergence, but I think just the calmingness and just like compassion in this deck really works well for when I'm dealing with RSD specifically. Another deck that actually feels kind of similar is the Light and Dark Places. The monsters, I feel like, are not similar, but I feel like they could exist in the same world. Now this is an affirmation deck that focuses around kind of pulling the light from the shadow, and I think that really is what it feels like to me, because dealing with RSD does feel like a very shadowy experience, and I don't know that there, for me, is another way to see it where it just wouldn't feel that way. Just be the nature of the feelings going on. And so using this deck to kind of find the light in the situation, it feels like this way of kind of pulling myself out of those intense, often, I don't know if irrational is the right word, but maybe sometimes, especially when it's like just a perceived rejection, not even like a definite rejection, it can feel very irrational. And so I really like this deck for that specifically. I just think it works really well in that way. Now this deck I talked about in my latest recent acquisitions, actually this duo. And this is another two decks that I feel like really work well with, or have worked well for me for working through anything that has to do with like what I'm kind of discovering about myself, but I've used it for this topic, and so it is the Create a Story Cards Animal Village Oracle, or it's not even a real oracle, they are story cards, but paired with the Tarot of Wonderland. Is that what it's called? I can't think of what it's called. Tarot in Wonderland, but the Llewellyn Alice Tarot. I just think that these cards, the scenes in these story cards really just, I don't know, they always hit the nail on the head. Especially when it comes to asking questions around like, okay, like how can I help myself right now? Like what, or even like what's really going on here? Just having these images, there's something about them and something about the array of them that it works every time. It really does. So I love those, and I especially love using this tarot. This is probably my favorite tarot right now for any kind of readings around neurodivergence. And I do kind of think that the whole story of Alice in Wonderland is a bit, is this a term? But like neurodivergence coded? Like they never say that Alice is neurodivergent, and I'm not here to say like she definitely is, because how would I know that? I wouldn't. But I just think that a lot of the things going on in here, or even just like the combination of all the characters, it's like I can find characteristics that I display everywhere in this deck. And I just feel like I relate to a lot of these characters, specifically when it comes to these topics. And so I've just really been blown away by this deck in general, but especially for readings around neurodivergence. I've loved it. I really have. So that is, I think it's the Tarot in Wonderland. Yeah, we're just gonna say that. Okay. Now, a deck I really like using in the moment. So I'm kind of really in that panic, in that intense anxiety. The Heart Align Affirmations Oracle. And now I really like this is because I feel like this deck really is kind of designed with messages and affirmations that are kind of meant to pull you out of any sort of like mental extremity that might be happening. Is that I don't know my words there. I'm not going to try that hard to think of it. But I hope you know what I mean. But then also it's got this spot gloss heart on it. So it gives you a tactile experience as well, which is really helpful for me for just kind of re-grounding myself. But I think these messages are really perfect. I love bringing this in my work bag for if like I am experiencing that at work, and you know, in that moment it's really hard for me to do any sort of other self-regulation tactics. It's really nice to just like bring this to the bathroom or to our staff room if no one else is in there and just pull a card and just sit with it for a second to kind of calm myself back down. I really, really have loved this deck in that way. And last but not least, I've got two oracles of the same vein. One is very, very new. So this is the one I've really used for this so far, is the Wild Whiskers Spirit Animal Oracle. But I also recently got, this is by Faina Laura. I recently got in her Happy Tales Oracle, a positive dog deck. And I'm loving this one. I mean, I knew I was gonna love it because I am a Faina Laura stan, but I like dogs. I really love dogs a lot. I don't have a dog, so I didn't like expect to like really want to use this like all the time. But these two work in such a great way of like when you just feel like you need a companion. And like I was saying before with the Into the Lonely Woods, where a lot of this does really feel like a lonely experience and lonely things to work through. It feels kind of isolating. I have loved using these oracles in the way of pulling a companion to just have with me in that moment when I need it. So this is a deck of animals, and the messages for this one are right on the card, which is really nice. You get 3 keywords and the messages. So it's, you could just pull the card and it's all right there. There is a guidebook. I don't really tend to use it. But it's just nice to kind of ask, like, I just need kind of an animal companion to sit with me right now and sit with me in this feeling so I can just really work through it. And this has been so awesome for that. I love this deck. Everything about Faina Laura's stuff, it's so great. And this dog oracle, I got it in like 2 days ago. Oh, I think also it's gonna be so awesome to use in this way. So it's all dog breeds. Now this has the name of the dog and the 3 keywords. So I do like using the guidebook so far. But how, especially since it's the, like, when you think about dogs, they really are like those constant companions, very consistently friendly and loving towards humans. And so just the idea of, and there's also like they always do that thing where like in schools during like their big test weeks and finals weeks, they bring the dogs, like the service dogs you can just pet, and how relaxing that is. So I love the idea of just having a dog companion with me. So I not that I'm excited for one of those moments, but I'm excited to hopefully have this with me the next time that happens, so I can just have a dog companion. I just love it. Look how colorful too. I love this one as well because it's so colorful. So that is the last thing I have to show today, and I think I am going to shut my pie hole now. Or I'm just gonna keep rambling. Because I don't even know what I've said in this, but we're just gonna post it. Anyways, I hope you all are having a wonderful... When am I gonna post this? I don't know. I hope you're having a wonderful beginning to your week, we'll say, and I'll see you again very soon.